Well, we've already been seeing some of the negatives as effects of gambling in our neighborhood and communities. We know a lot of people go down there and they spend money in these gambling houses, and of course they get very little, if any, benefit from them at all.
I didn't want to die, and I thought I was going to die. I really was trying to kill myself.
Well, the mindset that they have is they just know they're going to win.
This story about the gambling addictions and the effect it's having on black people, and especially black women, has to be told.
JackPot. The social and legal implications of gambling in the black community. This film discusses a subject that is taboo in the black community: problem gambling. This is an issue that reaches into people's homes, churches, and jobs, but its effects are rarely discussed. Gambling has caused great heartache in families and communities. Some have lost their homes, some have fractured important relationships, and others have even taken their lives, and yet their story is rarely told. This documentary speaks to those who are struggling with this problem, but do not have a voice. The black community has a long history with gambling, from numbers running, spades, bingo in churches, to casinos and the lottery.
We know that certain cultures, such as African Americans and even the Chinese and Asian community, tend to have a predilection for participating in gambling. And maybe it is part of our long-term culture, because what we would call small games of chance in our neighborhoods. You know, we knew who ran the numbers in the neighborhood, and we knew that, you know, at the card table and those kinds of places, you know, bets were being placed and going on. But that was small-time stuff, and normally you weren't betting that much to get in trouble.
Another characteristic that may make an ethnic member more susceptible to gambling is if culturally that particular community has gambling as a part of its normal activity, behavior, the way they fellowship, the way they just participate in life. For example, in some communities, card playing is just something that families do. Every Friday night or Saturday night, they play pinochle or backrack or spades.
So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's more or in black community or less in the black community. It is one of the things that is part of the black community, as it seems to be in all our communities.
Many of the traditional forms of gambling in the black community have been replaced by casinos. The following three people were waiting at a bus stop after leaving the casino. They shared their opinions concerning the effects of gambling on the elderly, the disabled, and the community at large.
When the Atlantic City casinos were open, it took you a little time to get there to lose your money. But this way, in the inner city, you know, you only have like a 15 or 20-minute ride. You know, and most of the time you're going to lose. And you find a lot of senior citizens, some of them have 2 or 3 incomes coming in behind their Social Security, their pensions, then they have their husband's pensions, then they have their husband's deceased, and you'd be surprised how much money these senior citizens have. And I know that they lose a lot.
Oh, I went in and got my card, my new card, so they put $20 on it, okay? So I put it in there, and it was going up, you know, $25. It was going like in 15 minutes. It was out of it. That was it. Done.
Well, do you know anyone who's ever been addicted?
My sister, she is.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what kind of effect has it had on you?
It's just like, okay, just like somebody, I would say it's just the same thing as somebody doing drugs.
I lost my money. I was in there. I thought of it, but I didn't. I lost on the table, and I lost in the change. I had $20. But, you know, I think they had a lot of money going there, because the city right here, you don't pay a lot of people enough money to hit the count. But I had to balance the one in New Jersey. New Jersey, what? Get a lot of money. But I here, the city people, they ain't worth it. They ain't worth it. But it's nice in there. I mean, it's not like a lot, like a lot machine. But it's all right.
While some merely see gambling as a form of entertainment, each year more and more people develop a gambling addiction. Those affected represent a broad range of society.
One of the things that, of course, in any addiction is it's an addiction when it disrupts your life. As a matter of fact, I just had a conversation this past Sunday, with a young man in the congregation who's having trouble. And he first came to me about his trouble about paying rent. And as I dug deeper on why he didn't have enough money to pay his rent, I found out it's because he lost $2,000 gambling. And he's been working hard not to gamble, but it gives this man a high. When he goes and hits it once, then he's got to stay in there now because I'm going to hit it again. And of course, what the gamblers don't realize, or I guess they do realize, but somehow can't seem to control the impulse to go ahead and do it again because they think they're going to win again.
First effect is whether or not the person is affected psychologically. A lot of times we see that some people are at risk, what we call later onset gambling, like they were doing fine in their life all along, and then all of a sudden they develop a problem with gambling later in life or at some point in life. For example, midlife. We see a lot of folks who were fully functional. They had functional jobs, they had thriving families, there were really no problems, but all of a sudden, say, they reach some stage in their life and they develop a problem.
I had no interest in gambling at all until somebody in 2004, I think it was 2005, invited me to a casino to go gambling, and I said okay because I was, kind of depressed and bored with being here in Madison, and the casino is only about 45 minutes away from here, and apparently I'm one of those people, and there are many in this country, who has an addictive personality and is very, very sensitive to the sights, the sounds of especially the slot machine gambling. I had no idea that I could get hooked on a machine or could become addicted to a machine until it started happening to me. And so here I am in my 60s or in my late 50s then, having what turned out to be some kind of life crisis where the machines, it seemed like the machines were robbing me of my common sense. So I was caught totally off guard with this. And it took a lot of therapy and me almost killing myself a couple of times. One night running off the road because I was so tired, and then drinking a lot. I started drinking really heavy. And so I felt that this was suicidal behavior.
My mother is a past addict or a compulsive gambler, and I would say probably I would consider it a problem when you start to realize what a problem is and how a gambling problem looks, and I would say 13. But being realistic with myself, gambling was occurring in my household from the very beginning. So the 13 would be when I would think she had a problem, and when I started to maybe be a little more vocal about her gambling. But I think it got to a really bad point after I left home and I'm living my own life, and her gambling has just gotten to an all-time high where she was a manager of a company and totally took advantage of the fact that she had a petty cash bank to her name. And in terms of her gambling habits and taking off and being so close to Foxwoods now, like she had moved, and all of a sudden Foxwoods was 30 minutes away instead of when we lived in Boston being 2 hours away. And so she was there all the time, and she spent out, I think the total amount of her mortgage, so much so that every month she was putting back in the petty cash, her mortgage money, and then taking it out after the accountant would count to make sure petty cash was balancing. And I mean, it had a total huge effect that it caused her to actually have a suicide attempt.
And here's the other thing. We don't put money in shredders. You know, if you stand up and shred your money in a shredder, people will probably try to put you into the mental health institute. But putting your money into those machines is like putting money into the shredders. But there's the hope that you're going to have a jackpot. You're going to win some back. And it's all by design. All of these casinos are designed to rid us of our common sense so we can, you know, relieve ourselves of our money because the states say that they need some revenue. It's a vicious circle. My point in writing this book is twofold. First of all, to give black folks, period, generally, and all communities of color and vulnerable communities, a forum to begin to talk about the problems of the proliferation of casinos around this country. This is a new industry, a relatively new industry. So the records are just now being, you know, statistics are just now being kept. But if you look online, you can find almost nothing about African Americans and casino gambling addictions. Not because it's not happening, but there's nobody around to do the work.
The previous testimonials represent people who have experienced the worst effects of problem gambling. Their stories support the argument that the church can play a role in addressing gambling addiction. While the church has traditionally been known as a pillar of the black community, it has often sent mixed messages when it comes to the issue of gambling.
Some people maybe turn to the church for help. I actually think that the Catholic Church, which was originally my religion and my family religion, just helped perpetuate her behavior. I mean, you know, Sunday afternoons after church, there is a huge bus that the church is trying to fill up with to take people to Foxwoods. I mean, are you serious? How are we helping people? And my mom would sometimes get on that bus instead of driving.
Sometimes the religious community is sending mixed messages, so saying, you know, you shouldn't gamble, but they also have raffles. For a person who is experiencing problems with gambling, a lot of times they're in the closet. They're not talking about their gambling because religion oftentimes has certain views about gambling, and within some religious communities, they may be teaching and preaching that gambling is a sin.
The people in the churches, you know, our church leaders on board. Some of these people sponsor the trips to the casinos. You know, they need to think twice about that because this is destroying our communities.
So what we're trying to encourage is we're trying to educate religious leaders and spiritual leaders about problem and pathological gambling. Like, what would be wonderful is if several things could happen. One is if faith communities, spiritual communities would get educated about problem gambling and pathological gambling, and then if they would preach and teach it.
Some of these churches, I think, do have counseling services, or used to, you know, make themselves available. But it has to be put on the agenda. Somebody has to say something about it, talk about it, either in a sermon or in meetings. I know that there, in a lot of churches, there are other groups that, you know, that meet for addiction. Set up a Gamblers Anonymous, you know, program.
While churches can address those who are already addicted, many believe the real solution is to prevent casinos from entering into the community altogether. The opening of the Sugar House Casino in Philadelphia serves as an example of how complex the debate on casinos has become. Part of the discussion in Philadelphia focused on the legislative process, the role of community input, and the cost-benefit analysis of bringing casinos into cities.
The legislation for slots gambling in Pennsylvania was passed July 4th weekend 2004 without any public debate or discussion, and it was actually attached to a small bill about horse racing, and basically that the original bill on horse racing was completely deleted out, and a 130-page bill that the casino industry wrote, along with Senator Vincent Fumo and others, was put in and then passed again at a time when no one was paying attention. I think the reaction of the public wasn't very strong, in a way, because there wasn't a lot of discussion or debate or any.
The process, the whole process, was flawed in the first place. If we were going to bring casinos to Pennsylvania, the citizens of Pennsylvania should have and could have had a right to vote on whether or not they wanted to have casinos in their communities or not. That was the first flaw, was when people like Governor Ed Rendell decided that he wanted to make Pennsylvania a casino place without necessarily going to the people and asking them, did they want to have casinos in their neighborhoods and communities? So from the very beginning, it was a distasteful way of which to go about doing business. After that, they basically denied input from ordinary citizens in any meaningful way. Since the goal here was to get casinos at any cost in Pennsylvania, there was no forum really set up to where if you went in to provide reasonable information about the negative impact that it might have, that somehow that would be weighed in the right way. There's simply no real way to make that happen. It was being jammed down the throats of folks.
The city of Philadelphia, although there were some promises made kind of at the beginning of the process, never did any sort of serious cost-benefit analysis that looked at things like, what's it going to cost to put more police around these facilities? What's it going to cost, in terms of the additional crime? And we just saw a situation where 3 customers or 4 customers at Sugar House were beaten up in the parking lot and robbed. What's it going to cost to investigate and prosecute those sorts of crimes? What's it going to cost to make sure the fire service is available? What's it going to cost on a public health level to make sure that there are enough prevention and intervention and treatment options for people who do run into pathological gambling issues?
In Pennsylvania, the really only program, as I understand it, that exists to deal with gambling addiction is what is called the self-exclusion program. The idea is that a gambler who feels that they have a problem and no longer wants to go to a casino essentially pledges to not go to a casino. They actually have to go to Harrisburg, and by putting yourself on that, you agree to that if you're found at a casino gambling, you can be arrested for trespassing, and that you're not entitled to any, to recover any of your losses, nor are you able to gather any of the winnings, if you have any.
When the Sugar House Casino opened, hundreds of people showed up, some in support and some in protest. Many of those in favor of the casino focused on the creation of jobs, the right to personal autonomy, and the revitalization of the community. Those in opposition, such as Casino Free Philadelphia, argue the social and economic costs to communities far outweigh the benefits. They also argue that casinos do not offer sufficient support to problem gamblers, and casinos specifically target certain demographics.
The crowds are big, and so is the money. Sugar House Casino is open for business. Many patrons wasted no time wanting to see the finished product with their own eyes on day one. They had company.
Very crowded. My sister enticed me. She twisted my arm in the back of me and said, let's go. And I said, sure, why not?
So it didn't take a lot of twisting?
Oh, sure, it didn't.
The lines began forming the night before. By the time the doors opened, a mad rush inside to the 40 live table games and 1,600 slot machines on the gaming floor.
The quarter machines are winning.
What'd you win?
$20. Well, it's better than nothing.
It's been a big day. Boy, we really had an exceptional turnout today. It's been exactly what you kind of hope an opening will be, and it looks like Philly's welcoming us with open arms.
Well, not everybody.
Hey, I'm Liz. I'm here today with Casino Free Philly at the opening of Sugar House to remind Philadelphia how much we have to lose from this casino opening. It doesn't happen all in one snap. It happens over the long term, but the suicide rate goes up. We lose jobs from local businesses that aren't being supported because people are putting their money here. On a personal note, I lost my father about 6 months ago. He was a gambling addict for his whole life, which I didn't know. And he lost all his money and declared bankruptcy, and then 2 days later killed himself. And like I said, I knew he gambled when I was younger, but I thought I thought our whole family thought he had stopped. He had just done a really good job of hiding it. When you lose everything, then people find out, but by then it's too late.
Regardless of where you fall on the casino debate, most agree that more focus should be placed on making sure that treatment is not only accessible, but also utilized by problem gamblers. Although Pennsylvania has programs such as a self-exclusion list, some argue that more legislation should be passed to support problem gamblers.
We do have a lot of our Gamblers Anonymous rooms and fellowships are being held at churches, so it's happening more. They're providing space for that, but we need more.
Funding needs to be made available for treatment of people with gambling problems. As we make casinos more available to people, the number of people who who run into trouble is bound to go up, and there needs to be some sort of safety net.
There's also something that's been pushed by a former gambling addict, Bill Kearney. It's a really, I think, very smart, reasonable piece of legislation which would require casinos to provide monthly statements to everyone who is gambling with the cards. And they're very scared of that idea, the casino industry, because part of, again, like their success is to actually divorce people from the experience and the economic impact. So a monthly statement would bring that, would connect a gambler to their losses, which is a very frightening concept for the industry.
I, recommend that people find whatever program or group they need if they can't talk to their parents or their families or their ministers. But talk to someone and say, hey, I've got a gambling problem, before it's too late.
For those struggling with a gambling addiction, the future can often seem bleak. Yet with adequate treatment options and support from family, friends, and the community at large, there is hope.
It's such a personal issue. I know my mom, when we talk about it, it's still hard to this day. I think she knows she has a problem, but for her to say that more than once is really hard. So I think you have to tread very lightly, and it needs to come from people who really care and people who aren't being judgmental. And I think even being a family member, it's really hard. So, letting them know that you care about them, letting them know that you're not yelling at them or telling them that they need to change because they're impacting you financially. It can't be about you. It has to be about them. And you need to make them know the impact that it's having on your personal relationship.
I advise them to find something to do in the church or, community centers or something, because I don't think this is good for them.
The pastor ought to be somebody you can talk to, even about personal issues and personal problems that are coming up. Because if we're going to deal with gambling addiction or any kind of addiction, we need to be able to talk to somebody who can give us a hand. We'll work it out. If you're sincere about getting rid of it, we'll help you. And that's what the church ought to do. And I think a lot of the times the church does do that. We do put out a hand. We do provide opportunities for you to come talk. Many of our churches have all kinds of ministries, helping ministries and social ministries that allow you the time to do that if you want to get well.
Just say how it hurts you and just be honest and real, and expect them to walk out the room. Expect them to hang up the phone, but pick up the phone when they call back.
I think the first thing that one has to do is just go to somebody they trust and say, I have a gambling problem. I'm hoping, again, that when people see me, this black woman who's putting this all out here, that they will say, I think I can talk about this too.
All of us are affected by the issue of gambling in our community. Whether it is a personal struggle, a struggle of a loved one, or a community struggle to adequately address problem gambling, we all must come together. The church, the legal community, politicians, academia, treatment practitioners, activists, and ordinary citizens. The social and legal implications of this problem are far too serious to be ignored.
JackPot Casino, I'm a boss now, you can call me Al Pacino. Blowing money cause I know I win back my C-notes. Ballin', now check my stilo. Adverse effects, now can you see those? Addictions, your bank account say zero. Crime, crack rocks and ski-yos. JackPot Casino. I can't tell the next man what to do with his paycheck. Go do your thing, make your money, I don't hate ya. How can you say there's no penalty when they rape ya? Casinos and a predatory nature. Clean my account and now I'm praying to the savior. Got no accountant, I'm just praying for some paper. Dear Lord, yesterday I was winning. I don't know when different, cause today I ain't hitting. Now I'm scratching and itching, how can I fall into this shit? I need money to win back my daughter's college tuition. I was just trying to follow tradition. Look up to hustlers and ballers when you're in opposition. That's when you make your own calls with no opposition. You would know opposition if your father was missing and you grew up in a place where they just see your race. Say something and you get maced and they call it a system. We are not all that blind, except for those of us that rhyme, preoccupied with shine, glorifying prison. JackPot Casino, I'm a boss now, you can call me Al Pacino. Blowing money cause I know I win back my C-notes.